All right, let's just dive right in. You know the scene. You walk into any bookstore, and there it is. An entire wall, maybe even a whole section, dedicated to self-help. Books that promise to make you richer, more confident, a better leader, basically a whole new you. They're sold as this golden ticket to a better life. But you have to wonder, right? What's really going on behind those covers?
And that really brings us to the big question, the one we're going to unpack here. It's a hope so many of us have. You pick up a book and think, okay, this is it. This is the one that's going to flip the switch. But really, can a few hundred pages actually do that? Can it totally transform your life?
I mean, the appeal is obvious, isn't it? In a world that can feel pretty chaotic and demanding, these books feel like a lifeline. They're presented as this clear guide to a more balanced, more productive, more successful life. They tap right into our deepest hopes for who we could become.
So let's start right there, with that core promise. Let's look at the powerful idea that pulls in millions and millions of readers. What is it that we're all hoping to find in these pages?
Well, it usually boils down to a few big things, right? We want to be better leaders. We want to feel genuinely confident. We want to build good, solid habits that stick. Of course, we want to get our finances in order. And maybe the biggest one of all, we just want to understand how our own minds work. I mean, these are pretty universal goals.
Now, some of these books have become so huge, so influential, that they're treated as more than just advice. They're like the fundamental pillars of what it means to be successful.
A perfect example is Stephen Covey's The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. This thing is a classic for a reason. It's not just a list of tips, it's a whole system, a complete framework for living. You've probably heard of these habits even if you haven't read the book. Be proactive, begin with the end in mind, think win-win. It's this structured, principle-based approach that's been shaping people for decades.
And that's the key takeaway here. These foundational books are positioned as the very rule book, the constitution that successful people live by. They aren't just selling tips, they're selling a complete operating system for your life. And wow, is that a powerful idea?
Okay, but now we have to pivot. We've seen the promise, we've seen the impressive systems, but let's ask the tough question. Does any of this actually work? Are these books genuinely useful?
And you know, the most honest answer we could find is this perfectly simple and yet perfectly complicated phrase, yes and no. I love this because it gets right to the heart of the matter. The value here isn't black and white. It's way, way more nuanced than that.
Let's tackle the no part first, because it's pretty easy to understand. A book is just ink and paper, right? It can't magically rewire your brain or your bank account. It won't do a thing if you, the reader, aren't actually willing to put in the real hard work. A lot of these books can also sell a fantasy, an unrealistic promise that's totally disconnected from reality. At the end of the day, the book is a tool, not a magic wand.
To really dig into this no side of the argument, we're going to do a deep dive on one of the biggest bestsellers in the history of the genre. This is where things start to get, well, complicated.
Yep, we're talking about Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. This book is an absolute monster. Over 40 million copies sold around the world. It basically single-handedly shaped how an entire generation thinks about money. So the core idea is this powerful story comparing two father figures in his life. His poor dad, his actual father, was smart, highly educated, but believed in job security. His rich dad, his best friend's dad, was an entrepreneur who was all about building assets and making his money work for him. The whole book is framed around the lessons he learned from Rich Dad.
But here's the bombshell. The big problem? The rich dad? He isn't real. Kiyosaki himself admitted in an interview back in 2003 that Rich Dad is basically a fictional character, a composite. He even compared him to Harry Potter. Think about that for a second. The entire credibility of the book rests on these supposedly real lessons from a real mentor who never existed.
And the critiques don't stop there. A lot of the advice in the book requires a ton of money just to get started. It can seriously oversimplify really complex financial ideas, and it often takes these one-in-a-million lottery win type stories and presents them like they're a repeatable formula for anyone. Not to mention, its harsh stance against formal education and having a job can be genuinely misleading for people.
So, if the big promises can be overblown and the advice can be flawed, where does that leave all of us? Well, this brings us to the most important part: how to build our own map by learning how to read these books consciously.
One of the most helpful things to understand is this distinction. Most self-help books are like recipes. They're prescriptive. They say, do these 5 steps and you'll get this result. Self-development, on the other hand, is about building the fundamental skills like critical thinking or emotional regulation that you need to forge your own path. It's about learning to cook, not just following one recipe.
And that brings us to the real superpower here: critical thinking. This is the skill that lets you read a book like Rich Dad, Poor Dad and be a gold miner. You can sift through it all, find the genuinely valuable nuggets, like the idea of assets versus liabilities, and then just discard the rest. The goal is to engage with the ideas, not just swallow them whole.
A fantastic way to think about this comes from Daniel Kahneman's work on our 2 thinking systems. System 1 is our fast, automatic gut reaction brain. It's the part that gets all excited by promises of getting rich quick. But System 2, that's our slow, analytical, and deliberate brain. It's the part that steps back and asks, wait a minute, does this really make sense for me? And, well, it takes effort to use.
So the bottom line is this: the real goal when you pick up one of these books shouldn't be to just passively follow the instructions. The real goal should be to use the book as a trigger, as a tool to fire up your System 2 thinking, to make you stop and reflect on your own life, your own goals, and your own path forward.
Which leaves us with one last thought. We started by asking if a single book could change your life. But maybe that was the wrong question all along. What if instead of searching for the one book that has all the answers, we use these books to help us find the one question that will change everything? The question that forces us to think for ourselves and truly begin our own transformation.